Today I'll be sharing 5 rental codes to get you started on the Regulation G ladder. Hello everyone, this is VGC Mike back again with more Regulation G content. Today I'll be sharing my 5 current rental teams that I have loaded up into Pokemon Scarlet. And the cool thing about all these teams is that I have made videos with all of them, so if you want to see how any of these teams are played in any way, you can check out any of my past videos in order to see how I approach certain matchups or just how the team functions in general. Let's start with my most recent team, which is my Choice Specs Terrapagos team. This team is very oppressive thanks to its main 2 leads of Terrapagos and Chi-Yu, or going Flutter Mane and Terrapagos. Flutter Mane Terrapagos is better if you need speed control, like Icy Wind and Thunder Wave, and then you could either choose to Terrestrialize or not Terrestrialize with your Terra Starstorm. Because your Choice Specs, it's going to be dealing large damage either to a single target or to both targets on the other side of the field. And then Terrapagos plus Chi-Yu actually can just knock out pretty much any Pokemon. There's a very specific type of lead that can disrupt this, but most Pokemon will end up getting knocked out by the combination of Heat Wave and Terra Starstorm after Terrestrialization. And that's just because Heat Wave plus Beads of Ruin does so much damage, and then if you need to resist the Heat Wave to live it, you can't Terrestrialize to try to take less damage, otherwise you're just going to take even more damage from the Terra Starstorm. After Terrapagos Terrestrializes, it'll become super effective. Other key components of this team are the Rillaboom. This Rillaboom is not like a normal hard-hitting Woodhammer style Rillaboom. He is fast, he has max speed and Jolly, and that is to outspeed Adamant Urshifu. So Adamant Urshifu, specifically the Focus Sash Urshifu, because some Urshifu aren't max speed, but the Focus Sash Urshifus usually are because there's no reason for them to run bulk since they have the Focus Sash. But Adamant Urshifu will hit 149 speed if he chooses to max out that speed stat. And Rillaboom, if you go max speed plus Jolly, hits 150. So that means that you can hit him with a Drum Beating, slow down the Urshifu, which would outspeed your modest max speed Terrapagos. And then you can hit them with the Terra Starstorm afterward, and there's nothing they can do about it. I've had pretty good results with this so far, especially into balanced teams that have multiple Fake Out users and Urshifu. So a common way to deal with Terrapagos would be to try to fake him out, break the Terra Shell, and then have the Urshifu get the close combat, which if they use a Stellar Terra, which is pretty common on the Focus Sash Urshifus, will knock you out even if you do Terrestrialize to try to avoid the Terra Shell breaking. So in those cases, a lot of times I'll just fake out the Fake Out user with my Rillaboom, who's always going to be faster than a normal Rillaboom or a Incineroar, and then they can either protect the Urshifu or attack Terrapagos. If they attack Terrapagos without the Fake Out breaking the Terra Shell, then it just, it takes not very effective damage, so that's fine. Then the follow-up turn, you can use your Drum Beating and Terrestrialize Terrapagos and pick up the KO on the Urshifu. Amoonguss is here for a couple of reasons. One, for general redirection and to spore things that are more annoying to deal with, like Zamazenta teams I usually bring Amoonguss into. He's also helpful into Trick Room. So the Kali Ice matchup a lot of times can be very easy or very annoying depending on who they lead. A lot of times the Smeargle Kali Ice teams are very problematic for me if they choose to play it smart and like fake out Terrapagos turn 1. Otherwise, the team usually gets rolled if they choose to do anything other than that, and we lead like Terrapagos Chi-Yu. But Amoonguss does give us a pretty good chance. But other than that, Amoonguss is just a general good Pokemon. He also helps us into Urshifu because he's got the Rocky Helmet. So a lot of times, if they think they're just gonna go for that close combat on Terrapagos, or if they want to switch it up thinking I'm going to switch in Flutter Mane, Amoonguss comes in, and if they go for Surging Strikes, then they're just going to lose 50% of their health due to the Rocky Helmet. And then lastly, we have Raging Bolt, who just kind of covers a couple other weaknesses that this team deals with. Draco Meteor plus Sun plus Life Orb actually KOs Miraidon as long as they aren't like specifically Assault Vest or like extra bulky with their special defense stat, which isn't usually the case. And then Raging Bolt is just kind of extra good into Pokemon like Urshifu Rapid Strike. And then the Thunderclap move is obviously very good because it has priority and is base 70 damage, which with a high special attack stat like Raging Bolt has is pretty significant. Now, my next most recent team that I was playing was my Miraidon Dondozo team. This team has a couple of tricks and a couple of specific matchups that it can deal with pretty well. So first of all, let's talk about the Dondozo and Tatsugiri. Dondozo on this team is a body press, defense boosting, order up style Dondozo. Because of this, he pretty much completely walls Kali Ice and Zamazenta. He's also very good into Zacian, which isn't super common, but he is there. Zacian and Zamazenta get ignored pretty easily because of the fact that their attack and defense boosts are ignored by Unaware. So they just can't deal very much damage to Dondozo. And if you start using Order Up a couple times, your defense is going to be so high that any physical attacker isn't going to deal any damage to you. Then Kali Ice just has a bad type matchup, so his ice attack doesn't do very much damage because it's not very effective, and it's also a spread move, which Dondozo usually prefers to get hit by spread moves when he's in his combined state, because then he just takes less damage in general. And then his next best option is like high horsepower, which does hit for neutral, but it's not stab, so no big deal there. And then if they're not bringing anything like that, I don't usually bring the Dondozo mode. There are probably some exceptions to that rule, but Dondozo is usually something you bring if you're looking at a bunch of physical attack Pokemon that could be problematic. Other than that, our main squad is Miraidon and Whimsicott, which is a very common duo. The big difference with ours is that we're Covert Cloak on the Miraidon, and we are Focus Sash on Whimsicott, which usually it's Covert Cloak on the Whimsicott and something like Choice Specs on Miraidon. So because of that, we can set up Tailwind, and we don't have to worry about a fake out specifically targeting a Miraidon. That is something you might have to watch out for the Whimsicott, but a lot of times people won't fake out Whimsicott either because they're expecting it to have Covert Cloak, they don't know if it has Covert Cloak, or just because they don't want to get Encored on the next turn. And then we have Entei as well, who is also immune to fake out flinching, but not because of his item, but because of his ability Inner Focus, which makes it so he cannot flinch. He can also not be intimidated. So if you're looking at a very fake out style balanced team, then you can just run Entei and Miraidon next to each other. They have no option to fake out anything, and then they're just going to have to deal with those two Pokemon by knocking them out instead of trying to flinch them, and these two Pokemon hit like a truck, so usually that can be pretty rough for most Pokemon. Entei is also Terra Normal, which boosts up his extreme speed, but also makes your matchup in the Kali Shadow a little bit better, because they won't be able to get double knockouts anymore. They'll have to target down one Pokemon at a time, or use their Astral Barrage, but only be hitting the one Pokemon at a time. And then we have Ogerpon, Cornerstone, which has the Sturdy ability. One of the main reasons we're running this Ogerpon over another one. This just kind of makes our team a little bit more scrappy, and makes our end games a little nicer because we'll always have that one Pokemon in the back that will have to get hit twice in order for it to get knocked out. He's also very fast, and the Ivy Cudgel being a rock type move is actually pretty nice for covering some of our weaknesses, or not our weaknesses, but some types that we can't hit for super effective damage, like fire types. So Whimsicott kind of gets walled by fire types with his only attack being Moonblast. A lot of times with Entei, we're locked into Sacred Fire. And then Miraidon can hit fire types for neutral pretty heavily, but it's just nice to be able to cover that damage since we don't have a water type Pokemon on this team other than Dondozo and Tatsugiri. And speaking of Tatsugiri, our last kind of trick mode on this team is the Tatsugiri Miraidon lead, where because of the Choice Scarf item, Tatsugiri outspeeds Miraidon. You can use a Soak, which turns a Pokemon into a water type Pokemon, and then usually almost every time guarantee a one-hit knockout with Electro Drift, because Electro Drift has that secondary effect where it deals extra damage if it's super effective. There's very few things that can live that. The one thing that comes to mind that usually does and can live it is a Rillaboom with a Assault Vest, just because he gets rid of your electric terrain on top of having the Assault Vest. So just a heads up, that is one thing that can actually live the Electric Drift usually. But other than that, if the electric terrain is still up, pretty much everything is going to drop. And a lot of times, even if the electric terrain isn't up, if it's not like a super bulky Rillaboom with Assault Vest, they're going to drop anyway. Now let's talk about the first Sun team that I have to show you guys today. This is my Miraidon Sun team. It's very offensive. Its main mode is usually Miraidon, Whimsicott, set up the Tailwind, or Whimsicott and Chi-Yu, set up the Tailwind, and just start spamming Heat Wave. Pick up some chip damage, or hopefully more than chip damage. Then send in your Miraidon or your Entei and start picking up knockouts from there. This team is a little weird because it has an Urshifu Rapid Strike on it. But the Urshifu Rapid Strike and the Brute Bonnet are kind of our ways of dealing with the Calyrex Ice Rider mode. After you Terra Water with the Brute Bonnet, you're going to be walling those Glacial Lances with both of the Pokemon pretty well. But the reason this Urshifu is on the team is because specifically with the Life Orb item, it can knock out Cornerstone Ogerpon with Surging Strikes. If you have Mystic Water even, it actually kind of misses that knockout with the Surging Strikes, but with Life Orb, gives you just enough boost to KO that Pokemon in one attack, which is nice because then you can hit the Calyrex Ice Rider with a Spore or a Taunt with your Brute Bonnet, and then you prevent Trick Room from going up. Urshifu basically is just very good into any of the Follow Me Pokemon that try to stop you from setting up your that try to prevent Trick from getting stopped. So it depends a little bit on the Indeedee set, but usually Urshifu can knock out Indeedee as well. Usually you'll want to go for close combat in that situation just because it's a little bit stronger. They can still live that if they are like max defense, bold nature or something like that, but a lot of times Indeedee does get knocked out by it. And then if they try to use Fake Out next to Calyrex Ice Rider instead, you can Terra Ghost and you have Covert Cloak on your Brute Bonnet. So you can create a scenario where both Fake Out plus Trick Room and Follow Me plus Trick Room are not safe bets to set up the Trick Room, which this team really does not want to deal with Trick Room. Urshifu also kind of nice just because he gives you a little bit more of an option if you get stuck in the rain. Most of the time you're not going to bring Urshifu unless you're looking at a Kali Ice matchup and potentially a Kyogre matchup. Alright, and this is my first Terrapagos team that I made. This one is a Calm Mind variant, and it's all about setting up Terrapagos so that he can sweep with Terra Starstorm. So kind of the idea here is to protect Terrapagos with redirection like Follow Me or Rage Powder, or just use Raging Bolt to slow down, weaken the other opponent with Electro Web and Snarl. Thunderclap is also great for Urshifu because Urshifu is like enemy number one for this team usually, besides things like Miraidon. And then you have Incineroar to both kind of slow down the other team, weaken them with Intimidate. This Incineroar has Taunt specifically to kind of help stop Taunt from going onto Terrapagos, because if your Terrapagos does not set up any Calm Minds, it's kind of it's just not very threatening at all, because we have so much bulk that you usually want a Calm Mind or two before you start sweeping. Probably the two coolest members of this team are Clefairy and Screamtail. Clefairy is very helpful in letting you just kind of wall certain Pokemon. I have a very cool match that's featured on one of my videos where Clefairy and Terrapagos are just sitting in front of a Kali Ice, and we're just using Life Dew over and over again and attacking the Kali Ice, and the Kali Ice is basically just barely gaining any damage on both of the Pokemon. And then we have Icy Wind as a way to deal damage, but also as a way to potentially give us some speed control on the team too. Wasn't something I used a ton, but a lot of times if Clefairy gets taunted, it's completely useless. So it's nice to have something that can do, that has some utility and does some damage just in case that pops up. And then Screamtail is kind of our last line of defense in case we run into a Pokemon that we just cannot deal with very well. Miraidon, for example, was a Pokemon that I like to bring Screamtail into a lot, since Miraidon usually just has that one move that is super effective into Terrapagos, being the Collision Course. So if you protect with both Pokemon, he reveals the Collision Course, then you can disable it. If he uses another move to try to play around that, then you can Encore it. And then obviously Flare Blitz will still hurt, but if you get rid of the Sun, it should hurt significantly less. and which Terabagos can do. So that's the idea behind Screamtail. Same thing works a little differently for Urshifu, obviously, because Urshifu you can't just protect in front of it, wait for it to use close combat, but you can hit him with a Rock Tomb, which will slow him down. And unless it's a Choice Scarf Urshifu, you should then be able to retaliate with a Terra Starstorm, and hopefully, if you've set up enough Calm Minds, knock out the Urshifu before it becomes an issue. And then the last team we have for today is my Groudon team. So this team, if it interests you, I would lock in the rental code sooner than later, just because it's my oldest team that I have on the channel right now. And if I make another team, this is probably the one that's going to be replacing, or that's going to be replaced by the new team. So this team basically has one main thing in mind, and it's that Groudon activating the Sun plus Flutter Mane with Choice Specs and Terra Fairy are just a very powerful duo. So probably the coolest calcs that I was looking at when I made this team is that Flutter Mane, Choice Specs in the Sun plus Terra Fairy can Moonblast and one-shot Calyrex Ice Rider. And then if you're not feeling that, if you're worried about Terra or something like Terra Fire, which is possible, you can go for Choice Specs or go for Terra Fairy still, use Dazzling Gleam, but then follow it up with a Precipice Blades. And that combination has a very good chance of wiping most Pokemon in general, but that it specifically covers for a lot of Fairy type resistances. So Fairy is resisted by Fire, Steel, and Poison. Ground hits all of those for super effective. So that combination, it's Flutter Mane basically just hits like a truck, and then Groudon also hits very hard, but also can just cover for anything that's going to try to resist that Fairy type damage. The rest of the Pokemon on this team are to cover for other scenarios or other just kind of give us beneficial speed control. So Tornadus is a good lead that we'll go with a lot of the times. Like if you go Groudon Tornadus, just start hitting things with Groudon, set up Tailwind. And then once Tornadus drops, you bring in the Flutter Mane. And now, because we're not, booster speed on the Flutter Mane, I should have mentioned that, we're booster, well, we're not booster at all, we're Photosynthesis special attack. You want that Tailwind up if they have something as fast as like a booster speed Flutter or like Calyrex Shadow Rider, something like that. And then you just start spamming your extra strong Fairy type attacks after that. And yeah, you just try to end the game as soon as possible using spread moves or single target moves that deal a lot of damage. And then you have your option of either Incineroar, Ferrograph, or Torkoal. Torkoal is a potential Trick Room sweeper, but can also just kind of help you win Weather Wars more because you have a second Sunsetter. Incineroar is probably the most common fourth pick you'll go with, just because he has so much utility with the Fake Out, Will-O-Wisp, and Knockoff. And then Safety Goggles makes you a little bit better into things like Amoonguss. But yeah, this team can be pretty flexible. It can play in Trick Room or it can play in Tailwind. Usually you'll go with Trick Room if they have their own Tailwind, because another Tailwind team will likely be faster than you. But and then kind of the same thing, if they have Trick Room on their team, you won't want to run Trick Room yourself. You'll just kind of go Groudon and Flutter Mane and try to hit them with your spread moves to deal maximum damage. And then obviously bring your Torkoal as well, just in case they get the Trick Room up. But yeah, that's going to be it for today, guys. But yeah, these are my 5 most recent teams that I featured on the channel. So if you want to check out any games, if you are looking at the teams and you're not 100% sure how you would play it, or if you just want to see how I play them and go against certain matchups, then feel free to check out any of the games that I've played with the teams. And other than that, have a great day.